All right, welcome back to another IMA panel, the Independent Media Alliance. We're here today to discuss a very important conversation, something that you guys pretty much on every one of our channels has seen conversations about. And this is the larger point is around the Stargate Project, how that intersects, publicly and obviously with the mRNA cancer shot and the platform that that's going to build on top of everything else, the overlap with artificial intelligence and the many different characters we can get into that are aligned along that, not even including Elon Musk, which I clearly think is involved in all of this. But the main point is the intersection between all of that and something we've been talking about, which is the Internet of Bodies, the Internet of Things, which are technically two separate concepts, one meaning your refrigerator and your devices being connected to the internet, which is alarming in and of itself, in my opinion. Then you've got the Internet of Bodies, which is talking about the somewhat devices that are on your body or interconnected in some way. Then you've got something called the Internet of Nano Things. And this is what's interesting about this, and I've got some videos queued up we'll talk about today. This is where it's been for a long time, at least the conversation. And I think we should partly discuss whether some of this might be like a ploy or feigned or not actually there. There's a lot of that in the conversation as well, but that this is the focal point of a lot of the leading science and conversation, and yet it doesn't seem to be a part of much of the conversation at all. It's kind of alarming in its own right. And that becomes the overlap of nanotechnology having an interconnection to the internet and being internal in your body, flowing through your bloodstream or floating through the air and landing on your skin. And these are very real conversations. DARPA being a main part of this conversation, which is interconnected with much of Trump's administration. So today we're going to be talking about how all this connects and our concerns and where it may be going. So thank you all for being here today with Ivor, Steve, Derek, and Catherine here to discuss the concerns we have for all of this. So Catherine, if you'd like to start it off with, what you were concerned about and where you see this going. Oh, you're muted, Catherine. Oh, Catherine, you're muted.
What we're watching with the new administration is they're responding to a series of fundamental changes that need to be made. But one of the things they're doing is they're getting rid of the old tools of empire and building new tools. And that includes taking the next steps and building the control grid. And Ryan, you and I talked about this before the election, and that is there are four things that need to happen if you're going to build a complete control grid of the kind that we've been hearing about for the last couple of years. One is you need digital IDs, and we see them certainly forging ahead with that. The second is you need the fiscal side of the house to be controlled by the central bankers, not by the Congress and the people's representatives. The third thing you need an all digital monetary system. Now, a digital ID and a digital monetary system need extraordinary data capacity, and that's where Stargate comes in, which is the funding of $500 billion of data centers all over the country and the energy capacity you need to do those. And we see that as one of the first announcements of the new administration. And that included mRNA technology, which we know is very toxic and dangerous for humans. Interestingly enough, when the president announced the Stargate initiative, Purdue University announced its Center for the Internet of Bodies. And of course, one of the big questions on mRNA technology is to what extent is it part of injecting into our bodies nanoparticles of the kind that would help hook you up on the internet. And we've seen, if you come to the Solari report for years, we've been covering the mysterious ingredients in the injections, the mysterious ingredients in the spraying, the mysterious ingredients in the food. This has been going on for a while, but we are seeing a move to literally invasively track, surveil, control, and influence the population. And of course, if that can be integrated with financial transaction control and a social credit system, then we're seeing the ability to turn on and turn off people's payments in a way that, for example, during the pandemic, if they had that system in place, that if they don't want you leaving your house, your money or your car won't, your electricity and your money won't work. Or if they don't want you buying pizza, your credit card won't buy pizza. So again, this administration seems much more intent on doing it with crypto rather than a CBDC, which in many respects is even more dangerous than a CBDC. The CBDC, if the Fed does it, then they still have constitutional obligations to the Congress. If private infrastructure does it with, an all digital monetary system. Then you've got private and secret controls. But either way, it's something that we don't want to live with. So what we're watching is a rapid accelerating move to institute a digital control grid, certainly in the United States, but with systems like Starlink, invasive surveillance all around the world, which we've had for decades through Five Eyes. But this just makes it more intense. And clearly, one of the things that's happening, if you look at their policies, is they're planning on very significant land and asset grabs along with it, which is, even more disturbing. So I would say what we're looking at is, and I credit other people with saying this. We're canceling the old tools of empire and moving to new tools of control. And of course, that makes what's happening in Gaza or the genocide we've been seeing in the Ukraine even more disturbing. Because if you look at the land grabs currently underway, whether it's abroad in the Ukraine or Gaza or in North Carolina or Lahaina or Northern California, the tools and tactics being used to simply take assets is pretty scary.
Yeah, very much so. And I do want to get into that overlap and the points you made on that recent article about Gaza and the kind of central location, like the technate, it seems, and how they're all discussing this, as well as the land grab overlap, even some touching on like neuroscience and how you may think that will play in. Before we get to any of that, though, what are your guys' thoughts? Whoever would like to jump in next on where you see this going with Stargate and kind of the general picture?
I'll jump in with some thoughts here. Catherine already really outlined it very well, but I'll point to the article that I wrote recently for TLAV about Stargate and Trump partnering with the technocrats and mRNA and all the fun stuff, the promises of cancer cures. I think in the last week, I know we've got that clip pulled up from Tim Hinchcliffe. More and more people are paying attention to who Larry Ellison is and his role at Oracle. And, we could talk about Oracle's own connections to the CIA and contracts with them from the very beginning. We could talk about Larry Ellison's 2002 New York Times op-ed only months after 9/11 calling for a biometric security state to keep us safe from terrorists. We could talk about him just 6 months ago at another event saying facial recognition and AI will keep citizens on their best behavior, et cetera. So we kind of have an understanding of who the people are behind it and what they're involved with. But I'm going to drop these links in our chat if you can share them real quick, Ryan. I just remembered while we were sitting here talking about this that some people out there might remember that Biden had launched something called the Moonshot. And there's those links if you want to put them up. This was a program by the Biden administration talking about the same thing, using mRNA to fight cancer, using mRNA vaccines. And I'm sure I remember at the time, I know Whitney talked about it. I know we've reported on it. And I'm sure there were some conservatives, right-leaning folks, Trump supporters who were like, oh my God, Biden's bringing about the mRNA cancer vaccines. This is something we should be wary of. And, the amount isn't nearly the same. I think it said it was like a couple $100 million or 24 million. So it's still a lot of money, but nowhere near the amount that Trump has been able to secure or is allegedly coming from Oracle and from OpenAI and others. But nevertheless, I just want to make that point that Trump is really in a way just kind of continuing and picking up a trend that the Biden administration started with the Moonshot mRNA cancer vaccine program.
I don't know if you remember this or not, Derek, but both Biden and Trump had like fake cancer charities. And both of them were exposed to be just giant money laundering operations. Biden's was because of his kid that, Bo, I think that was the one that died from cancer because of exposure to burn pits in Iraq. And then Trump had a fake cancer charity too. So this is kind of an ongoing grift that has now merged with the broligarchs, the tech bros. Shout out to Jason Basler for that one. And it's been the cover for it has been provided by the people that I've been calling broflakes, because they're not snowflakes anymore because Trump's in. But it's the exact same mentality where there's an inability to see past, I don't know, in this case, I guess, liberal tears. And then you wind up cheerleading for an absolutely insane transhumanist ideology because you think you're winning. And we see so much of that going on right now, where people will just grab the pipe, pack it full of hopium, take a big old hit, and tell you that, it's okay, that all of the AI stuff is happening. It's okay that the digital prison grid is being built out. It's okay that we're entering into an era of the Internet of Nano Things, because, we're winning.
Yeah, this
Yeah.
is a. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I just want to add one more thing real quick, brother. Just about to pick up on the thread, which I do think is the larger, kind of bigger, broader, long-term picture that people should be paying attention to, that Catherine alluded to. And I know that we have in the title, the Internet of Bodies, Internet of Things. For those out there who still haven't, the Internet of Things, I think, is the most basic level. That's, your house, your smart TV, all these sort of interconnected devices. The next level has been for years, Klaus Schwab, a lot of these organizations and technocrats have been saying, well, the next step is we're going to put the chips or whatever, the RFID devices in our clothes, and then eventually it'll be in our bodies. That's what they call the Internet of Bodies. And then there is the Internet of Bio-Nano Things, which is what many people have concerned about, that there's graphene or other sort of material being placed, either secretly or surreptitiously through the shots or other means, spraying, stuff like that, in human bodies already, or at least plans to do so in the near future. And I just wanted to point out that the mRNA, the whole thing does relate to that. For those who went through the entire COVID operation and didn't quite get that, the mRNA, the mod RNA that TLAV was reporting on is about trying to begin that process of turning human beings into something beyond just what we've been, and starting to begin that process of modifying. And it's also leads, of course, into the transhumanist dream of genetically modifying humans in different ways. And I just wanted to point out that, as a reminder for those who are still hanging on to the Elon Musk train, that it was his company working with the German company CureVac during COVID to help make the mRNA injections. And he said they were making little RNA microfactories. And then also point to, in 2020, Musk was receiving something called the Alex Springer Award. And he was talking about how excited he is about synthetic mRNA. And he said, you can basically do anything with synthetic RNA DNA. It's really like a computer program. So, I think with enough effort, you could probably stop aging, reverse it if you want. You can turn someone into a freaking butterfly if you want with the right DNA sequence. So again, this sort of language that we saw during COVID about the injections weren't just typical vaccines. It was a program that needs to be upgraded and updated over time. And this is kind of not only in terms of language, but in real practice, getting people used to this idea that the human organism is a type of software or computer program that can be upgraded. And if we can get people to accept that, then getting your latest booster or your latest update from the mRNA is not a big, it's not a big step.
And if I could just add, I try to track this all globally. So it's not just, it feels like America is spearheading the technocracy, the algocracy, but I'm tracking all the places that I used to live and that I still visit. And it's going on, down here in Mexico, or, many years ago, I visited the actual home of the head of Oracle in Mexico, long story, but Oracle they all have a deep presence here in Mexico. Amazon is throwing in now billions with the data centers they're building in places like Mexico. I was at the supermarket yesterday, and for the first time I saw smart bulbs, in the Mexican supermarket. Like I never saw those before. So they want us to start buying this stuff, as you say, Derek, install, start bringing online the Internet of Things. I saw stories in Russia now. Russia just developed protocols or regulations for smart homes. So like in Russia now, they're developing these regulations. And Kazakhstan, where I used to live, now they're bringing in the ability to block your smartphone if you don't register correctly. And so this is really a global thing that I think the West is spearheading. And to Steve's point, I'm getting some of my listeners tell me I've made a meme out of it. They tell me your pessimism is unbearable. And I think you mentioned Laurel Canyon 2.0, Steve, which I think is great. Amazing Polly brought up the other day. She started making videos again. And she said, podcasters are probably now paid by the regime. I guess we won't name names, but we know who. They get all the big attention, but they're just promoting this regime propaganda. And I think some people they're like soldiers in the World War I trench who just can't take the bombing anymore, and they need some good news. And I think we're just looking at things factually. So.
Now that we've brought this up, of course, this is something that's circulating around these conversations. It's impossible not to touch on, but like Derek brought up, and to touch on everything we're saying here, I think it's a really important thing. Like what you just hit on there is really important. It's important, I think, not to make this all about like everyone's willingly deceiving everybody else. I know we all know there's a huge part of that, but I think there's a lot of people out there that are either willfully ignorant and unaware of that. Like they think that they, it's like it's an uncomfortable, it's like cognitive dissonance, right? People box it out, or some people that just don't realize they're being played. But like Derek said, or all of us pointed out, like this kind of conversation, it's incredible to think that we can't acknowledge that this is, obviously something that all of us were calling out, and Republicans primarily going, Biden, that's bad, we can't do that. And now the same thing's happening, and those people, a lot of those same people aren't calling it out. Like that's a very obvious contradiction. The point I'm making, though, to go off what all you're saying, is that there is a huge sentiment in this that is about how somehow we're over fixating on negatives, which is, I'm sure that's out there. But what's crazy is a lot of us, we're going out of our way, especially the people in this group are going out of our way to make it a fact-based investigatory direction. And we are considering other things. And what's funny about it is almost as if we want the bad things. And I'm willing to bet everybody here would want more than anything for what they're claiming is the reality to be the case, because that would be good for everybody. So it's like this interesting dynamic where they're projecting almost what it's hard to frame, but I think the truth is that we're trying to break this down based on the facts and presenting what we think we can see, holding out until we can see the outcome, and that's somehow being claimed black-pilled. And I think that's important to highlight, but we can see these problems, and it's the same problems that were being called out in a previous Democrat administration. Go ahead, Catherine.
Right. So I think everybody here is holding out solutions. So
exactly,
one of the most important things about solutions. So I know Derek's been doing the reset. We've been doing sort of what the states can do. Everybody's been putting out a ton of solutions. The tragedy we see is so much energy gets spent on dead end solutions and not on real solutions. And it's remarkable where real solutions pick up and go viral, how much gets done. And that's why so much effort is spent to encourage people into dead end solutions. And that's why, if you think about how you explain to people that the Trump administration is just leading them into the control grid, you do want to give them real solutions. So, but I think we're doing that. And I do think you have to constantly balance it, because here's what's happening. So let me use mRNA technology as an example. In the early summer of 2020, so the first COVID injections hit in December 2020 and really came out January 2021. If you look at the mRNA technology, I get a business newsletter, which I find to be very accurate. And in the I think it was early summer of 2020, but it was early in 2020, long before the COVID injections had come out. Trump did his vaccine executive order in 2019, at the end of 2019. And then I forget when he put in the big orders, but it would have been after the first orders went in. So in the summer, the newsletter comes out and says, after the COVID injection, they're going to roll out vaccines, mRNA vaccines, for all these different kinds of diseases. And it was clear from the diseases they were listing that they were the adverse events from the COVID injection. And you realize what a fabulous business model, because the more you poison people, the more you give them more poison as the solution, and round you go. You just keep doubling down on the profits. And what the newsletter said was, investors, and remember, this is summer 2020, expect to make a great deal of money on mRNA technology. And so they were planning even then on huge investment and huge profits in mRNA technology that was going to go on for a long, long time. Well, then in 2021, I started to hear from investors around the world that they were being approached with major private placements to do mega vaccine factories in all their different regions of the world. And so you had mega vaccine factories for mRNA vaccines coming up all over the world, and investors were being promised huge profits on the notion that we were going into a world of biowarfare, and these vaccines were going to save their populations from being killed. And you needed to be able to make vaccines, lots of them, very quickly, in response to, rolling pandemics from here on out. And so when we look at this infrastructure, or look at the president bringing up the Stargate initiative, this is something that started with the Going Direct reset, which is the reset that started in 2019. And it's going on and on and on and on. And we're simply seeing the rollout. It's what you said. you know, this is going on globally and it's rolling out, and it's a much deeper, longer, you know, plan than anything to do with one single administration.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the important part of it, is that it's getting couched in a partial conversation. And this is what I think I get kind of, I hopefully end on this larger point. I think we're all calling out the good things happening as well as the bad things, but simply going, but look, if you're only going to couch this on like only this administration, it's just not true. And we can easily prove that. And then that becomes, you're just raining on the parade. And so it's very clear that this is a long span, like the continuity of this project is very clear. Welcoming Mark Goodwin to the conversation. Thanks for joining, brother. Good to see you.
Hey, everybody. Nice to be here. Thanks so much for having me. Hi,
Hey,
Catherine.
Mark.
Hi, guys.
Hey, I want to pick up right there where Catherine was just say, for one, just to reiterate to anyone hearing this who does still hold out this view that anybody here is somehow black-pilled or just negative, whatever. I just to reiterate, I think everybody here has various ideas on what solutions are. They might not be the same and they come in different forms, but the key there of what Catherine said is that we are not focused on promoting what we believe are dead-end solutions, which is following Trump just blindly or following anybody blindly or just trusting that politics alone is going to fix things. So I just wanted to reiterate that. And thank you, Catherine, for the mention of the People's Reset. And I just hope people out there who hear these talks with the IMA and just our individual content we're putting out there recognize that it's not that we think that, I'll speak for myself, it's not that I think things are hopeless or there are no solutions. It's just that I don't think trying the same old thing over and over and just hope, putting your hope in these people is going to get you anywhere. In fact, this morning I was just posting to my social media. We saw just yesterday RFK officially got confirmed, and I noticed that during his hearings, he said that he stood by and believed the childhood vaccine schedule was a positive thing. He also said that, he generally supports the shots. He just wants good science. And then in another section, he praised Operation Warp Speed as an extraordinary accomplishment from Donald Trump, which obviously we know he did some great work over the years at CHD and elsewhere, calling out those very things. And every time I point this out, I'm basically, again, being called black-pilled, and people are saying, he just needs to say whatever to get into office. That's how the game is played. So you have to lie and do this. If he was real or stood on the truth, he would never get in there. And my argument has basically been, he was never going to get support from certain Democrats anyways. So trying to kowtow to like, okay, I'm not as extreme as you guys think I am, isn't, in my view, a winning strategy. I think we should stand on principle and truth when we have it. Others call me idealistic or, naive or whatever. But I just want to point out that I think winning in their terms or winning on their field, if it involves having to compromise yourself, I don't personally see that as a win. And of course, I am skeptical and hesitant about what's going to come with RFK in relation to the mRNA shots. I wouldn't be surprised if we end up seeing him praise them. I mean, Trump, we started the conversation talking about Stargate. And as I mentioned, this is a picking up from what the Biden administration was doing with the moonshot program. I wouldn't be surprised in the coming weeks or months or years if we end up seeing RFK praising mRNA vaccines. And then the other thing I want to just mention on that whole black pill term, I do think this is the new conspiracy theorist, whether it's being seeded by intelligence agencies or just people who are picking it up on the internet, this new term that as soon as you hear it, in the same way conspiracy theorist was meant to dismiss people, okay, this is a crazy person, not to be taken seriously, etc. Now in the sort of broader truth freedom community, when somebody hears, oh, don't listen to them, they're just black pilled, it's meant to send a signal or message of, this person has nothing worth hearing. This person is just negative. Don't actually look at the data they're sharing. Just dismiss them out of hand. And I think that's a dangerous place.
Derek, I said the exact same thing. I think Tuesday when Ryan's on AM Wake Up. It's the people who had been called a conspiracy theorist for the last 4 or 5 years, especially because they were rightfully calling out the transhumanist ideology on the left and all of the COVID nonsense, know that they can't weaponize conspiracy theorist as an insult anymore. So they have to find a new word. That word is black-pilled. And I think all of us have gone pretty deep in the paint over the last several years, exposing the psyop that the black pill is in general. That whole doomer mindset where, well, it's going to happen anyway, so we can't do anything about it. And what are you going to do? Might as well make a shekel or two off of it. And that's exactly what's happening with the people that I've called broflakes.
And just to add, I guess, on the real quick, you're talking about mRNA and Stargate, which was a wonderful movie back in the day with Kurt Russell. And I've been thinking of Gattaca recently because, Larry Ellison, he's shout out to Tim Hinchcliffe, who's sitting through all of these long WEF meetings. And isn't it funny how they changed World Government Summit, the name, to World Governments Summit to be less obvious? And all of these clips, and Ellison is saying now, I use that meme from that video game in the 80s, all your bases belong to us. And he's basically now coming out and saying, all your databases belong to us. And Tony Blair, of course. And they're aggressively pushing to put our health and DNA data onto one database. And I think there's, maybe to get people's thoughts on that. I think one of the purposes is these guys are transhumanists and they believe that they can live forever. I don't think that is possible at all with whatever technology. And so they need our data to try to get information on to put into their, formulas to see if they can get a solution to extend their lives. But also, I think for Gattaca, like in the movie, to create a case system, basically. So people who will be injected, modified, and it's social credit. I think it's one of the final pieces to get our DNA sequenced for that social credit system. So just throwing that out.
I love Gattaca, by the way. What a good movie, but definitely not a good look for the future.
Both those are probably seeded to prime us for where we are today. Sorry to be the conspiracy theorist, but let's go ahead and before I get into some nanotech stuff that I want to connect on this, Mark, since you weren't here to start, any kind of overview thoughts on Stargate, artificial intelligence, even like the cryptocurrency overlap to all of this, and the CBDC, which Catherine referenced. Any thoughts to kick that off?
Sure. Well, just right off the bat, I think it's interesting, the background of Ellison and Oracle. It literally started as Project Oracle, which was, under the umbrella of the CIA. And then, they incorporated as a private business. And then their first, customer was the CIA, which seems to be sort of a running theme with these, huge data brokers like Palantir and, even PayPal. And so, there's that, again, that movement into the private sector always is it's an interesting dynamic to note because they run that playbook quite a few times. And Ellison too, interestingly enough, wrote this very disturbing essay right after 9/11. I believe it was an op-ed in the New York Times. And he talked about how, well, if we had a big database of everybody's information, we could have prevented this thing. It's like, okay, sure we could have. Why is the answer to all of this stuff always digital IDs and databases of citizen data? Why is that always the dialectic outcome that, that they, push? It's the answer, whether it's, the Trump technocracy or, 2001 Patriot Act stuff. So they run these playbooks a lot. And so us doom pillars, as we watch it over and over again, and, and I'm younger, I'm relatively new to the independent media scene. You guys have been holding it down for a bit longer. And I'm sure I've noticed the cycles, the cycles are compressing and getting quicker and quicker. I think it makes our job easier to be like, hey, 6 months ago, they were saying this. Now they're saying this. It does make it easier when you're not working on decades long, phase shifts. Really quickened.
I just want to jump in and point out, if you read people who are working with the AI, the thing that builds the greatest AI is not the smartest software developers. It's the guy who has the most data. And so if you're trying to compete with China, you want as much data as possible. So I'm assuming one of the things that Doge is doing is they're hooking up all the government data. I mean, it's a treasure trove of data.
They've already said that.
Somehow hooking it up with the AI.
Yeah.
And there are various reasons to do that, but AI is it's like a data vacuum cleaner. And part of the game is keeping the Chinese from getting our data, but the other is getting your AI to get access to the most data possible.
By the way, just to reiterate that's something that I've already seen kind of floated out, and there's even a Daily Beast article, surprisingly enough, talking about a leaked recording of them discussing how, it was going by consolidating all of the different logins from all the different locations and to make it easier. And the main point was like, I'm pretty sure that's against the law and the Privacy Act. And he's like, well, we'll figure it out. We're going to start it anyway. And it was leaked. So he didn't think that would come out, but that's definitely what it's about. And the whole point is using AI to make it more efficient. Derek recently pointed out in an article, the whole efficiency movement is a precursor to technocracy. It's really hard to miss all these overlaps. I'd like to comment real quickly on what Mark said.
Can I just insert one thing, Ryan?
Yeah.
So one of my favorite new solutions, and I have to look more into it. Some of you may know more about it. The Swiss are putting forward, there's a group collecting the petitions now to put forward a referendum to the Swiss government that a Swiss citizen has the right to live a non-digital life.
Nice. That's fantastic.
Anyway, so I'll try and find out more about it and publish about it. But
yeah, let me know on that.
Huge.
Well, that's just great to see, and this is like the point you made in the past, Catherine, and I think it's important not to forget is, I'm a huge example of how this, I have a hard time trusting anybody in government in any form, because we have very clear history to back why that's a good, thought, but it's never good to make it a broad stroke. Your point right there is that I would still always point out, maybe it's just that they see an opportunity in doing it that way because everyone else is going the wrong direction, but it's nice to see that there's still somebody in a position of power who's making what appear to be right choices. But I was going to say really quickly about the cycle. That's fascinating to me because I see it going both ways, right? Where we can see that it's gotten so rapid to where it's easier to kind of go time out, like what we just did. Here's Biden in January of this year going cancer shots, mRNA, and they're like bad. And now, it's interesting. It's very easy to see, but at the same time, it almost makes it impossible to catch everybody because by the time that gets into, they're 14 stories down the road and some new drone fog, whatever the next thing Elon Musk is jamming 45 times a day on Twitter. It's interesting, but it's a mixed bag, and to me, what that represents is this kind of rapid push to get us so kind of just flabbergasted. We don't know what to look at and what's going on, and we wake up inside of what's being built.
We're in a period of acceleration and inversion.
Yeah,
right.
And it takes the opposite administration to put forward the concepts that the previous administration would get righteous and correct pushback for.
Right.
And we can, that we've got examples of this all over the place. My favorite one is NAFTA. That was a George H.W. Bush program that got stomped out by the Democrats because they were like, why are you selling out American manufacturing? And then Bill Clinton got into office and they were like, hey, I can't wait until we sell out American manufacturing. And we've done this over and over and over. Joe Biden wrote the Patriot Act. It was the omnibus crime bill in 1995. But, Joe Biden was one of the co-authors of that. No way in hell it was going through under Bill Clinton. But as soon as 9/11 happened and George W. Bush was in office, all of a sudden we have the Patriot Act. And this happens over and over. Donald Trump banned bump stocks. Barack Obama allowed for open carry in national parks. It's so clearly an inversion. And I think that it definitely incumbent, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here. I really do. But it's incumbent on us to call this out as we see it and as it comes down the line. But it's getting increasingly more difficult to do that because of the algorithmic censorship that we all face, the kind of inverted hopium that most of the mainstream alternative media seems to be operating on. And so I'm very, very grateful for everybody that's here today and everybody that's in the Independent Media Alliance, because it really does represent the pushback on all of this acceleration, inversion, and insanity.
Yeah, no, I think that's important stuff to make sure people, because we're all on the same page doesn't mean anybody else is, thinking about it that way. And so I'd like to bring this back to kind of the main focal point. Just what you're saying though is important because, again, I really do think that what that is, and we saw the same thing during the COVID-19 mania, which I felt was just as rushed. And I think what we're seeing is this is interconnected, as Catherine was talking about, is that this is all about getting everybody, just kind of all confused and basically falling back.
It's called shock and awe.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Shock and awe. We've been doing it all around the world while we've plundered assets. And one of the reasons everything that Doge is doing could be done perfectly lawful and it could be done speedy. You can do neurosurgery with a scalpel instead of a chainsaw. So this has nothing to do with they can cancel all the corrupt stuff. They can do it lawfully. So it doesn't have to be done this way. The reason you do it chaotically is because you want to put people in shock and awe. And it's we just did a great interview with Richard Werner on case studies of basically plunder capitalism around the world. And when you want to plunder assets, the first thing you do is you put everybody in shock. So they're doing shock and awe.
Yeah, and I think it's
yeah.
important too for folks that, theoretically, are on the vanguard of understanding what's going on. It's like, I don't know, I look at COVID stuff. I didn't know that going direct happened. I feel like I'm one of the most informed, not in an arrogant way, but it's just my job, to be very informed about specifically how government policy affects macroeconomics. And I didn't find out about going direct until like 2022, until Titus and Catherine told me about it, and that's scary, right? But what did I spend all my time researching? I was living in the Bay Area, and I spent my whole time researching about mRNA and shedding and this and that, and why I can't go into a bar that I helped open, and all this stuff that was going on. I was distracted by the hypernormalization, the shock and awe, all these things, and I was hyper focused on this stuff. And a lot of that stuff that I was researching turned out to not be true also, right? Even though I was sort of in the dissonant counter narrative, that is also controlled too, and also has a shock and awe to it. So I spent my time when I should have been researching, hey, wow, why did X trillion dollars go to BlackRock? As the petrodollar dies and oil futures go negative and gold goes down to 1,500 and Bitcoin goes to, I noticed pretty good. I did okay, but there was still so much that I missed that this stuff happened. The repo market failure in August 2019, the going direct money manager, Fink and Trump stuff. Like I missed a lot of that in the moment. And it's like, it's good to admit that and tell people, it's like, hey, even I got pulled into the counter, and I was reading 3 hours a day about vaccine stuff and this, and not to say that it's not important, but I kind of missed the bigger plunder capital play that happened. And that was the point. So even the most dissonant aware people can still get distracted in the spin cycle, in the shock and awe, hypernormalization, whatever you want to say. So, if we get sucked into that stuff, how does a quote unquote normies, stand a chance? It's
This is a really good point though, about how the best manipulations use truth, sometimes mostly truth. And I think what you're talking about is not, it may be not even called a deception, but things that are like, they're very obviously important to research and break down. But as that was happening, there's another whole bigger layer, like what Catherine highlighted, that had been going on a very long time. And this was one part of a much larger agenda. And so it's just that's kind of what we're all trying to highlight today in a larger way, is that, look, there's a lot of things happening. Just because it's not trending on Twitter does not mean it's not a major part of what's going on. And I think that's a lot of the manipulation. And that's, again, not to say that RFK being confirmed is not somewhat a good thing, or that there's other things that happen that might be good or bad, that it means that that's everything that's happening. It's a lot of multifaceted dynamics. And so to bring it back to the larger point today, we're talking about like the Stargate, artificial intelligence, like the whole technocratic point being what most people aren't really seeing, or at least we're being shouted away from even talking about. So if you guys, in their comments, would like to play a couple of things to kind of talk about this nanotech overlap.
I'm going to just comment real quick, Ryan, because I got to
Mm-hmm.
leave in just a few minutes. But just to pick up on the thread, and then I'll add one other thing. So I started calling this, as I think Steve said a moment ago, the great inversion in late 2023. And I borrowed the phrase from another person. But I do think that is, in addition to the shock and all that everybody here is describing, that the great inversion is just a handy way to kind of think about what's happening. And on the most basic level, it's just the passing of the baton from left to right and back and forth that we've witnessed, over decades at this point. But it's obviously deeper than that, because what people are being sold is that this is the Great Awakening. This is the golden age of America. We've won. Trump's in office. RFK has been appointed now. There's nothing else for us to do. We just need to sit back and enjoy the show, which is like a big, one of the QAnon phrases is, enjoy the show, trust the plan, etc. So that's what I think is, to me, most dangerous within the alternative independent media landscape, truth, freedom movement, health freedom movement, even crypto, etc., is that people are being sent this line of thinking that says you don't have to actually be striving to create freedom and liberty in your own life anymore. You don't have to actually take any steps to prepare yourself for the incoming technocratic state, because the good guys are now in control and everything is going to be taken care of. And that, to me, is an extremely dangerous mindset to be passing on to the audience, and just really, I think it's demoralizing. They think right now it's something to celebrate, and this is why we're all being called black pilled, because yeah, you're pointing out negative things. We're just trying to have our celebration of RFK or Musk or Doge or USAID being cut. And even with that, just a side note, I think the whole USAID story, there's obviously some positive information coming out, but it feels like, did people just discover USAID? Did people just discover the foundations and these organizations that, I mean, you can go back to G. Edward Griffin, who's, legendary researcher and one of the people who's been around before most of us. And he was one of the only journalists in the 1950s reporting on the Reese Commission when they first pointed out the influence of the Ford Foundation and these other organizations. So in many ways, what we're seeing this grand reveal, at least so far, if you've been paying attention, none of it's really that particularly like surprising. So I just wanted to make that note. And then before I do have to bounce, I don't want to change up the subject, but I just want to mention this article that I just published at TLAV, which was kind of picking up on some of the research that Whitney had just done in her latest article about Jim O'Neill, the deputy secretary at HHS, who, the framing of her article, and I think it's legitimate, is that he might be in this position to stifle any potential good RFK may do. Like you said, Ryan, there might be some good coming out of this. I do have on good authority from my sources that there is going to be, if not an executive order, definitely some action regarding water fluoridation. And for those who followed my work, I've been reporting on that trial, the lawsuit, for years now. So obviously that's something I could get behind, but at the end of the day, the federal government doesn't control water fluoridation. So at best, RFK can just make a recommendation and the CDC will no longer recommend it. That would be a positive step in, a step in a positive direction. For me personally, that doesn't excuse the Zionism. It doesn't excuse the praising of Operation Warp Speed and other things. But nevertheless, in this article, I point out, I think it's at least 10 different people, including J.D. Vance and Elon Musk, David Sachs, Howard Lutnick, Jim O'Neill, Ken Howery, Jacob Hellberg, Michael Kratsios, Vivek Ramaswamy, of course, Alex Karp, who's not officially in a position, but is connected to Teal through Palantir and a Bilderberg steering committee member. And just pointing out that these people are all in, they're in Trump's cabinet now. They've been nominated, they've been approved for the most part, or they're on the way to being approved. And they all have either worked directly with Peter Thiel. And I don't mean like they were his secretary 30 years ago, or they worked in some sort of small inconsequential position, but deeply ingrained in his fellowships and his foundations, in his investment firms. And again, what Mark was talking about, always the connections with the CIA and all that fun stuff. So I just want to point that out again. Like, this is not being black-pilled to acknowledge that 10 years ago, 12 years ago, as one example, I'll name a name, Alex Jones, InfoWars, would be calling out and raising, the alarm bell about the Bilderberg group is infiltrating the administration. We need, if it was Obama, if it was Bush or whatever, but starting with the first Trump administration, they went completely silent. I did a video on this during the first Trump administration, showing how Trump had appointed Rick Perry, who used to be governor of Texas, where I'm originally from. Rick Perry was a regular attendee of the Bilderberg group. And you can go back and find InfoWars reports from 2011 and 2012 saying, Texas Governor Bilderberg, freak out, raising alarm bells about it. And then there's nothing reporting about it starting in 2016. And there's absolutely nothing on InfoWars right now about Peter Thiel's influence, him being a Bilderberg steering committee member, or how many different people through him are connected to this sort of technocratic class. And I think that, to me, it says a lot about some of this mainstream alternative media. It's not black pill to call those things out. It's just facts. And we're just saying we should probably pay attention to these things.
Dark Bros is where you're wrong, because the globalists are getting beaten by unelected foreign billionaires.
But wait a minute. Can we bring up the Epstein network? Because it's the exact same thing. If you overlay what Whitney and Mark have done on the Epstein network, there was a ridiculous move to sort of attack Whitney over black pill, and that's when I said, oh, they are really afraid of the Epstein network, and they keep promising that the Epstein list will come out when Patel goes into FBI. So I'm curious to see whether anybody thinks they really will let those lists out.
But see, this is the problem with that.
This whole administration looks like an Epstein client list, right?
It does. But the problem with that is that this is where you wade into the area that gets mostly called black pilled, is that we're talking about just skepticism. At what point did we stop being inherently skeptical against the power structure? Like, because your side is
I
in
don't
power.
see this as skeptical. So I worked in Washington for years, and whenever I would go into a congressman's office, the first thing I would ask is who owns his control file. Mm-hmm. That's lobbying 101.
Right. But the problem being is that ultimately it's right to ask these questions about whether or not, if they're going to release that, how do we possibly know that that's actually the full list? How do we ever verify that? Or the JFK file, they do it every time. Or how about with RFK Jr. in the same point? Let's say they do an EO and they get rid of all the fluoridation, or at least they state an EO that says that's supposed to happen. It's right to point out that this has already been on the rapid decline. Derek's been breaking this down, the Florida Action Network. And so it's still as Derek said too, I'll say good. I'm glad that's being stated, but we have to recognize that these things are being presented in a way to almost pacify people. And I get that can be seen as you just don't want to be happy about it.
This is why I always come back to money.
Happen simultaneously. That's all I was going to say. Go ahead.
So this is why I always come back to money. Because what I've said, where I've focused from the beginning of from the inauguration on, is Trump instituted the Financial Advisory Standards, or Financial Accounting Standards Advisory Board Statement 56, which was basically an administrative policy approved by Congress to take the U.S. financials dark. So that was a policy that basically made the U.S. government and related contractors' financial statements secret. Now, DOJ and the president could reverse that at any moment, and they haven't even brought it up, and they haven't mentioned it. And it keeps not getting picked up. No matter how many people put that out on the internet or on social media, it keeps not getting picked up. The second thing is there's $21 trillion missing as of 2015, before FASB took the financial statements dark. So let's assume the number, if they just kept going, is now maybe 36 trillion. DOJ is saying they're looking to generate savings on the current expenditures of $2 trillion. Well, if you're cutting current expenditures $2 trillion, but you're not mentioning the fact that 21 trillion as of 2015 is missing, and more as of today is missing, and you're not doing anything about that, and you're keeping the U.S. financial statements dark, then you're just not serious. And that's simple, because it's just pure math. It's just money and math. And canceling a few NGO contracts at USAID doesn't touch it.
Well, since that got brought up, and I agree, and I've seen you bring this up more than once, Catherine, and it's clearly there's people in Trump's orbit and Elon's orbit that point that out, and it just gets brushed over. It's not there's no partisan draw to it, But what I think is important there, though, is the hold on, I just lost my thread there. Shoot. Well, go ahead, Catherine.
One thing I do want to point out is the Epstein network was very critical, in my opinion, to helping launder and move all that money. And, I've taken Whitney's books and mapped them up against sort of the different money moves and found amazing information. For example, I didn't know until I read her books on Epstein that it was Bob Rubin who introduced Epstein to the Clintons in 1994. He took him over to the White House. And I think, and there were scores of meetings, Epstein going back to the White House. And then as soon as Clinton left the administration, Epstein and he got on a plane and started moving money around the world. So if we look, in fact, at how many people were deeply involved in the Epstein network then, who are in this administration and are doing nothing to go find that $21 trillion, I have to presume that we're just looking at the next step of the going direct reset by the people who, engineered the first few steps.
Yeah, and
to me, they didn't vote on the going direct reset until 2019, Mark, but they could never have done it if it hadn't been for FASB 56, is what I think.
100%. And you look at some of the parallels too of, it really is the same. It's the same network, it's the same players, and it's the same playbook. And Steve brought up, NAFTA being this, H.W. Bush plan, and then Clinton implemented it. Well, what did Rubin do after he left Treasury Secretary and lets, Summers come in and take over? He goes to work for Citi, and Citi takes over the biggest national bank in Mexico as the peso collapses, and who shorts the peso down and makes billions of dollars. It's this currency speculator cabal that Epstein is a huge, connected with. It's Soros, it's Louis Bacon, it's Joe Lewis, and these guys are all now directly connected to the modern version of this, which is digital currency. And they're all heavily connected with Tether, with Bitcoin, with Ethereum, with Peter Thiel. And, like Louis Bacon and Thiel are doing EOS, they're heavily connected with Lutnick, with Tether. and Lutnick, is buying mansions from Epstein. Now
Right.
why is no one talking about that? The guy who's running Treasury, Besant, is a 30-year Soros lieutenant. Who's I don't care about this, but an adopted he's a gay man with an adopted son. Imagine the right, if they, or the left, if Obama put in a 30-year Soros lieutenant who's a gay man with an adopted son, the right would never stop talking about that, and yet no one person on the right can talk about it. And never mind the Epstein connections. But I think the digital currency thing coming up is sort of the new money laundering. Is this, you got Trump making a meme coin that goes to $10 billion, the night before the inauguration. It's like, who needs BCCI? Who needs savings and loans? Who needs, these
well, but don't you think that's pay to play?
Of course.
In other words,
you can't see where the money's coming.
People who bought on the initial offering are secret, right?
Sure, of course.
It's money laundering.
So how is that not, unless you prove to me that's not a pay to play scheme, putting money in Trump's pocket for this and that? How?
It should be one of the largest financial, much like the Doge takeover of these Palantir Meta interns coming in and getting all access to the Treasury. It should be one of the largest financial political scandals ever. But everyone is so distracted and they're not paying attention while, Musk is saying, hey, maybe we could replace the Department of Education with Meta's AI. Maybe we can, replace some of these people with, algorithms and we're going to be so efficient and make government smaller. It's like, no, you're going to consolidate and create funding mechanisms and create pay to plays where, people that normally would never have any ability to legally on the record give Trump $1 billion,
right,
can buy $1 billion worth of liquidity of his pre-mined token or his wife's pre-mined token, and they get $1 billion right in their wallet. And the taxpayers don't care. The voters don't care because Bobby's in, because Tulsi's in. And
I always tell people, we used to give people presidential cufflinks. We never gave them access to the Treasury data in exchange for being the biggest donor. So I want to engage, before I have to leave, I want to engage you guys in helping me stop what I think is going to be the big scheme.
Can I make one point quickly before we move past what you guys were talking about? Because I just want to interject, is that it's important to also note on that, not just the cryptocurrency dynamic, which is unaccountable. Nobody can see, which is what you were talking about, is that there's also foreign money flying in, and many people, including Trump himself, have not fully signed the ethics pledges that are required by law that Trump put in his last administration. Think about how wild that is. And so you have foreign dynamics, which we can see, like Mary Madelson.
Well, they fired the White House ethics guy.
That's what I mean. There's just it's zero accountability, and they're not even claiming to have anything. People like many different people in his administration have not even signed these ethics pledges. And the person involved with that dynamic said publicly, like I think it was Newsweek that cited him, saying they could be funded by a foreign government. We wouldn't even know. It's like bing, 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 like exactly what I'm talking about. And so I want people to think about that, both with the crypto, which let's note was also pretty much a pump and dump, which just completely collapsed. A lot of these different things did. I think that we're seeing the co-option of this country financially and with technocracy, Zionism, all these things at once. I just want to make sure we point that out.
And the ethics thing is really funny too, just because, when Yellen was coming in to, brief the incoming Biden and Kamala administration on the GameStop debacle, she got an ethics waiver because she had taken 6 figures from Citadel Securities the year before, which is the parent company of Robinhood, which, had played, had been naked short selling. And so she's here coming in to brief the president, and she had just been paid off by these people, less than 18 months before. But what's the point of ethics at all if you can just get a waiver, just get a signature? So the games even that they're playing of fake, sort of responsibility or I can't think of the word here, but this what should hold these people accountability, it's all fugazi anyway when they can just get an ethics waiver and get this. And as we digitize and move further into that world, it's just going to get more and more insane. And obviously here we are. So sorry, Catherine,
they're the good guys though, right?
That's so I want help. Okay. So I'm asking for help here. There have been several trial balloons on 2 things that are sort of like a 1-2 punch. The first is you mandate federal and state purchases of Bitcoin so you can run the price way up. The second is you use the sovereign wealth fund to start swapping government land for Bitcoin. So if you can run the price up, then the initial holders, and I think you still got about 2% of the holders who've got about, I don't know, Mark, is 70% too high of the outstanding? Big position.
Sounds about right. Yeah, something like that.
So one of the trial balloons was that you can do it secretly and tax-free. And certainly if you do it in opportunity zones, it will be tax-free. So if you can mandate government purchases, and trust me, if I mandate government purchases of silly putty or Jello, I can run the price to the moon. Okay, that's just how life works. So you mandate government prices, you run the price to the moon, and then you swap out of your Bitcoin tax-free for all the land and real estate and mineral resources of the federal government. And you're watching David Sacks's crypto group looking at the quote unquote mandated government purchases. You've got Howard Lutnick and Besant doing the sovereign wealth fund. And that's where I think they'll do the land deals.
Is that also foreign policy, Catherine? So is that also being used in foreign policy, like for other countries to say, here's cryptocurrency value for your asset?
It could be, because they're trying to get the mandates going all over the place. I don't know if they can get the tax-free going all over the place, but
eBay is foreign IRS. So.
What I smell is a desire to pick that land up and pick it up cheap. And I'm grossly oversimplifying, but I think that one thing that the Independent Media Alliance is perfectly positioned to do is bring transparency to it in a way that absolutely kills their game. And I'll tell you why. I was just looking at the state of Utah. 63.1% of the land in Utah is owned by the federal government. 10% is owned by the states. The western states have a lot of land. You've got a lot of really smart people and major investors in Utah. It's not like Utah to get picked off cheap, okay? And they can do something about this, as can the other states. But they have to see it coming, and that's where we come in. And I think if we can help people see what the game is, this is a game that they can't get away with. But it means people got to, bring transparency to it really early.
The BLM land in Arizona and New Mexico is disproportionate to the private land ownership in those states too. You're absolutely correct. We had Joe Lonsdale, co-founder of Palantir, along with Peter Thiel, talking about how Doge is going to beat the deep state. Joe Lonsdale, by the way, is connected to Doge. He's attached to Joe. Am I taking freaking crazy pills here? How is this not obvious to everybody when you have the actual deep state coming out and telling you we beat the deep state, and people are like,
well, but come on, God bless the president. He made it clear he's a real estate developer and Gaza's a real estate play.
You know what? Can you touch on that before you leave, Catherine? I really would like to get to that part. Go ahead, Steve.
No. I was just, I wanted to throw it to you because you and I have talked about this for years now.
Yeah. No, I mean, I agree. And it's what I know it's unpopular even in our circles, but I swear to God, I think that most people see this stuff. Like I said the same thing during COVID-19, and I think we can acknowledge that was largely the case. I think right now with Israel, I said this the first month in, can we all acknowledge that the whole world sees what's going on, and yet somehow still it doesn't change? And I maybe you don't agree with that, but tell me what you think. But I think right now it's the same thing. This is objectively clear. Like you may disagree with who these people are, but for example, the mRNA thing, Trump's still supporting the shot. These things are black and white, and yet they just kind of go, well, there must be an excuse. Most of these people I talk to are like, what else are we going to do? Like, that's not support, guys. That's just that they're checked out. And so that's where I think we are. And I think it behooves us to not broad stroke all of them as on the, but I get what you're saying. And I do largely agree, but I kind of think most people see it. But so the point about Gaza, I do think is really important because but your recent work, Catherine, I think there's a few other people that were breaking this down in regard to how Gaza seems to be a central location for a lot of reasons. And whether Trump is doing that, what he's doing because he knows that and he's part of a larger agenda, or like you said, he just sees a real estate opportunity, and that makes sense to me. I think that this is a huge play for something much larger that ties in with the globalism dynamic, the Zionism dynamic, the technocracy, and this is sort of like the location where this will begin. And so I want your thoughts on that, because you seem to argue first that what we're seeing is a coup and that's a central location.
I mean, Netanyahu's been very clear. He wants a lot of the control grid infrastructure in Israel and that area. And I'm assuming, they need the oil and gas, they need the water, and they certainly would love to have the land. So, and part of that is they just need those resources for the control grid infrastructure if they're going to put a lot of it there.
And also, how do you manufacture consent for everything we're talking about?
Right.
You have to champion, it's the free market. It's just capitalism, baby. What? You don't like capitalism? What are you, a commie? I mean, that's basically the discourse. What, Kamal is better? That's where we're at. And it's like, no, we're not talking about, this isn't free markets. This is plunder capitalism. This is monopoly creators. I mean, that's Teal straight up says that. He doesn't believe in capitalism. He says, find a monopoly and dominate. And that's how you get, I wrote about this with Whitney and this piece, Tokenized Ink, about Larry Fink doing this 180 on Bitcoin. And I called it phase shift dialectics. And I pointed out, Malay going to Davos in a room of billionaires and saying, viva the free market, and everybody cheering. It's like, well, yeah, of course these billionaires want, now that they've stolen everything, of course they want deflationary money. Of course they want a free market, because it enables them to get away with everything they did in this like sort of karmic washing way of, well, hey, free markets are good. Everything's good. So it's okay that we just plundered the world, raided the treasury, inflated away your grandparents' wealth and all this stuff because you like free markets, right? And we're seeing that play, whether it's AI efficiency, government efficiency, the real estate play in Gaza, whether it's necessitating and mandating markets for pharmaceutical products, whatever it is, it's under this cover of this phase shift of towards the free market as being the great protector. And that brings in so much of the private sector play and why intelligence has gone into the private sector. Palantir's stock is going up like crazy. Bitcoin's going up like crazy. It's such a win. Well, what's the second order effect of all of this stuff? It's okay, well, the black books are gone. They are shadow books now. We will never find them again. And now they have
point out gold is skyrocketing because some people don't trust the plan. That's exactly what that's saying.
I had a great conversation with Tony Arterburn the other day about this exact thing, and what he's doing with his business at Wise Wolf Gold and Silver is trying to put these tangible assets into people's physical hands, even if you're not incredibly wealthy. So I just want to give a shout out to Tony there.
Right.
Yeah, no, I think what's interesting about all of it, though, is that it comes back around to the many different ways this is all playing out, bipartisan direction, the long-term agenda, and right now, right in front of us, I've never seen this much of an obvious presentation of it. So before you go, Catherine, do you think right now that this is literally rolling out? Are we going to see another cycle, another administration? Are we going to see what you've been talking about in Trump's administration?
So they're going so fast and they're making so much progress. We may not see another administration. We could even see the United States break up. So I think, radical change is upon us, and this can go in many different ways, which is why, even though it feels like we're not getting our message out there, I think we are. And I think the more we can get our message out and the more we can encourage people to start taking lots of actions with what they can do at the state and local or network level, we just need to keep doing it, because the nature of freedom is it always looks, kind of bad or hopeless. And then suddenly things shift. And what you're seeing all around the world, the U.S. is sort of walking away from their allies, leaving them high and dry. And now they're all sort of in a state of shock or licking their wounds. But what is coming, and Gaza is a big part of this, is you have billions of people all around the world, including government leaders, saying, something's wrong here. We're not playing. So what can we do? And we're in that interim period where a lot of people don't know what they're going to do or haven't coalesced yet. But I think the game is much more fluid than we think. And that's why we just got to do exactly what we're doing. And I so appreciate everybody here also because we're from many different places in many different countries. And that's what we got to do. We just got to be networking so that we can see it whole. I found the comments on what's going on in Mexico really fascinating. But that's what we need. We need to be working together to see it whole.
And just on Mexico, real quick, I interviewed someone recently, haven't published. He's a cybersecurity guy, veteran, and he was saying we might see U.S. airstrikes on Mexico this year. And I've been seeing signals that maybe that's possible. Ed Calderon, who I've had on my podcast, I saw a clip of him yesterday saying that cartels might go after Americans in Mexico. I might have to get out of Dodge. But that plays into what you're saying, Catherine, about U.S. disintegrating, because if something like that happens, I think it's going to have to do with what's happening in Mexico. And I had a guest I interviewed recently at People's Reset. I'm starting with the Spanish edition of my podcast, and he was saying, I had no idea, the state of Nuevo León in Mexico, there's a secessionist movement for some Mexican states as well. And I think that plays into this whole dynamic. So
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
Great conversation. I got to go, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine. It's always a pleasure. Well, I was going to ask you guys in general. So it's funny. This is what I love about this group and just kind of setting out a conversation and seeing where it goes. We didn't really get to a lot of the things that we were kind of the title and so on, but I thought we had a great conversation about this general thing. Did you guys want to get into any further, more technical stuff about the artificial intelligence, the nanotech, the Internet of Bodies, or did you feel you just want to wrap it now? I thought it was a great conversation. I'll let you guys decide.
I just wanted to say one thing that I think, we covered this a little bit, Ryan, when we talked kind of the bigger Bitcoin play here is, it's not a mistake that, the crypto and AI czar is the same guy and where there's this overlap here. And I think one of the main ways that
David Sachs, by the way, for those who don't know.
Yeah, David Sachs, the founding COO of PayPal, he was kind of the guy that, made PayPal the internet of money, basically. And he initially it was a Palm Pilot company where you could beam, dollars between Palm Pilots. And he came on and he was like, I'm not going to do this unless we turn to email, because, we live in Silicon Valley and there's like 8 people that own Palm Pilots, but everybody has email and that's where it's going. And he really was literally an ex-McKinsey guy came in and sort of, took the company from this like techno focus group into like actually scaling as a business. But him coming in as the AI crypto czar and how those overlap. And I think it's also, relates to the bio play too. But, AI really is useless without large caches of data. And then also crypto, the way that it works with these public blockchains is there creates this asymmetric informational advantage to have, the heuristics, that you can do on public blockchains, which you don't need warrants for, right? It's like kind of this wonderful thing for the public sector to spy on us without warrants. You need large amounts of analytical computation to be able to sort of triangulate and identify payments on these public rails. So even though we all technically have access to the public blockchains because they're public, to me and you, it's sort of a useless, X gigabytes of data because we can't really parse it because we have nothing to, no context to set. And it's really pseudo anonymous for us. But if you pair that up with, say, a Palantir, with, say, an Oracle, all of a sudden you have warrantless surveillance of every single transaction on the blockchain. And that's a really scary thing. And, I'm kind of this like coming out of the Bitcoin community a little bit and sort of, I'm the blasphemer now, kind of, saying a lot of these things that, there's a lot of issues with public blockchains. There's a lot of good too that can still happen. It's fun. There's a lot of things we can do that is cool. But the majority of people are going to get kind of run over by this thing. Whereas, maybe 10 to, 50,000 people are going to, make some money here and have some funds to fight back. That's cool. But, the billions of people remaining are really going to just get stuck with, warrantless, surveillable, programmable, seizable money. And sucks.
Right.
So AI is a huge part of that, and that's why they're connecting it at the regulatory level. It's a scary hill to tumble down, but we are full steam ahead doing that right now at the onset of Trump's administration.
And don't forget, real quick, Steve, that Ellison already said that they were going to be using the health data from Oracle, by the way, which was the Palantir, or I guess Palantir was included, but the point being that was the Moncef Slaoui pharmacovigilance for 2 years, but that nobody ever got to see, which I guarantee shows that they killed people, that now they're overlapping to train the AI that they're using to control our lives. And I see that as interconnected. Go ahead, Steve.
It is 100% interconnected. And just one more like final thought on the whole, black pilled thing. When you hear somebody level that at any of us who are just trying to do what we've always done, which is our responsible due diligence for any situation involving a government or the public-private partnership, know that that's I don't know, an okey doke. I know we're on YouTube and all that kind of stuff. I've gone almost an hour and a half without saying a cuss word. I'm pretty proud of me. I am. But understand that that's a deflection. That none of us, not Catherine, not Ryan, not Hervoye, not Mark, nobody here, not Derek, is black-pilled in any way, shape, or form. In fact, we're all going out of our way to get through it, to get together with people in real life, to highlight solutions every single day of how we can get out of this technocratic hellscape that's being forced on us. And it's one of those things that like, it's kind of twisting me a little bit in terms of having to deflect from that or defend it every day. And look, dude, I've got sharp elbows. I'll get in the pit. I'm ready for it. But man, we need you guys.
Right.
We need all of you who are listening to go ahead and carry that message forward. We're offering solutions every day.
Well, I would
We're
add
doing things every day. Go ahead.
Simply don't do anything other than look at what we're saying. Come to your conclusions about the data presented. Don't look at it through a partisan lens. Don't listen to what, listen to what anybody else is saying. But when you're looking at the data, don't apply what other narrative. Just look at the information and tell us that it's not worthy of concern. That's not to say that we know for sure the outcome. That's what we're all saying. Wait for the outcome, not what the last flowery word was stated, but what they've done up until now, and then what they do next, not what they say in between those things. And this is just basic logic, and this is what and so if you actually listen to a lot of our conversations, you'll get that along with a lot of solutions. And you get these bullet point clips and different stuff that people misrepresent. The bottom line is come to your conclusions about what's going on. And I think it's very hard to miss that there's a lot of red flags right now. And I hear that from you guys too, but go ahead.
I'm not black pilled. I'm with legal men. I'm cyanide pilled. No, I'm just kidding. I had two quick questions for Mark since he's here. One is, with the Bitcoin stuff, I kind of listen to the maxis and the skeptics and just try to form. I mean, that's what we're all doing here. You guys just outlined. We're listening to everything and coming to your own conclusion. I found this interesting account. I don't know much about him, Jacob King, who's skeptical on Bitcoin, but then he's hawking XRP. But I also had to sit down with I had to sit down with Aaron Day last week. I published that, chatted with him for an hour. And Jacob just posted something about Tether being the glue holding up the entire crypto market. And Aaron Day sort of talked about that as well, that if Tether collapses, everything can just fall down like a house of cards. And just going back to what Catherine was saying, where they've got this play to swap out assets. So I'm kind of seeing like there's two options here where I think you've written about this, Mark, Bitcoin dollar and all that, where they go to like a Bretton Woods 3.0. So they create a new Bretton Woods system where the dollar's not backed by gold or oil, but now by Bitcoin. And this is the new system that goes forward. Or like, as Catherine was pointing out, that it could collapse. So they might have a short-term play where they swap out assets and Tether collapses and Bitcoin collapses, or it becomes the new system. Just any thought on that?
Or they say, but don't worry, here's your crypto, so it's all good. We saved it for you, right? That's what a lot of us see coming. Go ahead, Mark.
Right. Well, first off, we've it's been a long time coming. We should do a pod, man. It deserves
Definitely.
a long talk. We should do this because we could easily talk about this for like
I'd watch that.
3 hours, man. I reject the sort of the tether truther narrative. I've always been sort of against it. There's kind of like one main guy, this account Bitfinex. Bitfinex is the parent company that Tether is under. They're a Bitcoin exchange. They were sort of infamously hacked. One of the largest deposits of Bitcoin at the U.S. government, the U.S. Marshals right now, is actually from Bitfinex. They got 6 figures of Bitcoin hacked. But anyway, it's this exchange that then operates Tether. They're the issuer of Tether. And they tried to deny being related, but they're very related. But this account Bitfinex has been blocked me for years, and his whole thing is that for years that, hey, Tether is not, will never pass an audit. Tether doesn't have the T-bills backing, it's this fraud. It's this fraud. As soon as it collapses, Bitcoin will collapse. Well, they've been saying that for 8 years. And all we've done is seen Tether go from, under 10 billion in 2020 to 160 billion. And who holds their treasuries? It's Cantor Fitzgerald, which was, is the CEO currently, is about to be our new commerce secretary. And is one of 24 primary dealers at the New York Fed. The number one, broker for U.S. debt. They trade more treasuries than anyone else.
Insider of insiders.
Exactly. It's like, I'm sorry. Yes, they set up Tether to be this amazing, misdirection of this offshore company and yada yada, but like, they are as nationalized as you're gonna get. They have the FBI on their platform, the Secret Service, the In-Q-Tel funded chain analysis are all onboarded. Yeah, exactly. So it's like, I don't think that they're gonna collapse. I think that the U.S. government needs them more than they need the U.S. government. I mean, I think that they can service the demand and buy trillions of dollars eventually of treasuries of T-bills at a time when nationals otherwise are dumping T-bills. So I think that the U.S. needs Bitcoin. It needs stable coins. Lutnick is now our commerce secretary. I saw this post the other day, and I'll leave it at this, but someone was, this Bitcoiner was, oh man, the president holds Bitcoin, the vice president holds Bitcoin, the commerce secretary holds Bitcoin, billions of Bitcoin, the secretary of the treasury holds Bitcoin, the director of the national intelligence holds Bitcoin, the incoming FBI head holds Bitcoin, the head of HHS holds Bitcoin, just listing all this stuff and bragging about it, right? Being like, look at what we've done. And it's like, okay, is this really this anti-state revolution if every single important person coming in this administration is holding this thing that's the head of the FBI being a Bitcoiner? Is that really like a good thing? Like what, maybe that shows, this idea of Thiel saying, my friends at the FBI tell me they'd rather criminals use Bitcoin than $100 bill, right? So we know they're phasing out cash. We know that they're moving towards a digital money. So how do you do it? Well, you set up this big dialectic, push Tether offshore, where in reality, they're actually this, crucial figure and pillar in national security of dealing with our debt and dollarizing the globe. So I think a lot of the people have kind of missed that. And they're still stuck on this Tether truther thing of it's going to collapse. It's a Ponzi. It's this. It's like, well, it really isn't. And it hasn't been. Now, they may do a controlled demolition and move in the next stable coin that's heavily regulated. I think that PayPal has their stable coin that's ready to go. And I've written quite a lot about that, about how I think it will probably start to overtake Tether. But I don't think Tether is really going to pop in any way that wouldn't be a controlled thing to just set up the next one, because the mechanism is way too important to dollarize, to continue the economic hedgement of the U.S. government, of the U.S. dollar. They need a neutral reserve asset to inflate into, and they could do gold, but everyone else would get rich in the world. If they do Bitcoin, it's pretty much just the U.S. And so I don't see why they would monetize and inflate into another asset other than Bitcoin. And then they need stable coins to be the debt buyers of last resort. And if they can kind of do both, they have a good chance of sort of establishing, economic hegemon for the next 300 to 500 years, depending how long this Bitcoin experiment can kind of last. And that's a whole other cycle of reserve currency of the world, right? Typically it's about a 300-year cycle. So they might be able to double down and get a whole other one. And the US always does what it needs to do to preserve its dominance. And if that means inflating away the dollar individually, they will do that, because they've done that time and time again. So that's the play that I think will happen. So I think when people are really pushing Tether's going to collapse, Bitcoin's going to collapse, buy this other coin, who knows? Anything can happen. But I think the mechanism is really, the only way the US can really come out of this really ahead is by embracing this technology. And it's very clear that they are. So I would take everything about that, the Tether truther stuff, with a grain of salt, the Bitcoin collapse with a grain of salt. And then, of course, buckle up and let's see what happens. Who knows?
Well, what happens? How do you have a fiat currency backed by something that's essentially another fiat currency? There's no real back. I mean, that's what we have anyway, but it's weird to have one backed by another, that they're both no real tangible backing of value. It's just, I think there's so much room for manipulation in there. It's crazy, which I think is the point.
Yep, exactly. So I think the CBDC that we will see is, we'll see private sector stable coins, which is what we're seeing on public blockchains, which is what we're seeing, backed by public sector debt, by treasuries, which is exactly what we're seeing. And then, of course, we'll see this neutral reserve asset. Wow, look at that.
I'm officially a Tomista, the alternative Mexican currency.
Wow.
So,
I like it.
Oh, wow. I don't know too much about that. That's interesting. But yeah,
Well,
I think.
Go ahead.
No, just the mechanisms that I just described there is the best outcome for the powers that be. They get warrantless surveillance, they get private sector restriction of customer access, whereas a CBDC, they might have to accept everybody. They get a buyer of their debt, and they get this public blockchain that they don't need warrants to surveil. It's sort of a best of all the worlds. And, again, I do think it's an active game. I do think that there are some things that we can do, understanding that this is what's coming. We can position ourselves to fight back. But we knew the digital economy was coming. Unfortunately, I think it was just sold to us as this freedom movement. And I think we kind of a lot of us missed the dialectic of, what is the second order effect of a Bitcoin system? And so we have to kind of just deal with that reality, because it looks like that's where we're going.
I agree. Well, I was going to say, I think that's a good place, unless you guys wanted to get anything else. And I was going to throw to Steve to just throw out the upcoming event that's going to be coming up in April that we're doing for our birthday, and the carnival after that. But before we get to that, is there anything else you guys want to throw out before we wrap? I'm going to go ahead and end with some of the clips I was going to play, just since all I was going to get into was the overlap of the nanotech part of it. But I feel like this conversation was really sound, and I really enjoyed the back and forth and a lot of important things we discussed today. So I'll leave that for another time, and I'll play them at the end. But anything else you guys want to get into? All right, go ahead, Steve. Go ahead and let us know what the upcoming event. We haven't heard about it. We're really excited about it.
April 4th, 5th, and 6th, we are gathering in friendship, fellowship, and in the spirit of building community just north of Nashville, Tennessee, on a 18-acre property that allows for camping. And here's what it's going to look like. All of your favorite podcasters are going to be playing music together on Friday night. Ryan and I have been threatening to do a co-birthday party for like 5 years at this point. Now we have an opportunity to do that. He and I were born a day apart, and so why not throw down? So we're throwing down, and we're doing that with Gene Owens from Faithless Town, Spiderland, Frank Kavanaugh from the band Filter. Actually, if you go to An Artist Collective, I'll pull it up. The whole thing, the flyers there and all that kind of stuff. We're Saturday, we're doing a day of live podcasts and live stand-up comedy featuring Brad Bankley from the Propaganda Report, Leonardo Joni, who has been really blowing up lately, and Sam Tripoli is going to be headlining. We're again live podcasts throughout the day. Charlie Robinson from Macroaggressions is going to be there. T. Snyder, who is my co-host every Wednesday, is going to be there, along with a ton of other people. This is really going to be probably the coolest party that you go to this year. I have a very blue collar audience, so I do not charge a lot for these events. It's $90, including camping for the entire weekend. Let's all get there. Let's all get there. It's going to be fantastic. Sunday, the owner of the property holds cowboy church. That's what she calls it. So we're going to have cowboy church on Sunday morning, and then we'll probably do another live podcast or two, and then clean up and get the heck out of there. But for tickets, go to anartistcollective.com. It's going to be a banger. It really is, dude. Scott Armstrong from Rebunk News and Rebunk Records is going to play on Friday as well. I'm so excited about this. I really am. It's going to be such a good time. And I hope that everybody who's close can get there. Hervoye, I know that Tease was twisting your arm a little bit. If you can get there, my dude, get there, because we all want to look short standing next to you. We all do.
I'd love to. I got to save up, though. I'm planning to be in Croatia for a really long summer. So it's kind of, yeah, you know. Are you guys going to play Neil Young's Rocking in the Free World?
Probably not. We're probably not going to do the Anthony
Right.
Blinken. We're probably not. However, I would play the weight. I would do. I would do that. I would play the weight. I would play jambalaya. The whole point of Friday night is that I wanted to do it like Willie Nelson's birthday, where everybody that you know that plays music just comes up and plays some music, and we'll have some solo performances. Ryan's going to do a solo performance. Gene Owens from Faithless Town is going to do a solo performance. Spiderland's going to do a solo performance, but we are going to have the Independent Media All-Star Jam, where as many of us as we can fit on that stage in the barn get up there and rock out.
Yeah, it'll be good, man. I hope you both can make it. Anybody else listening, it'll be fun, and it'll be a great time. I'm really excited about it, especially since it's so close, so I don't have to travel that far. So fantastic. But I think that was a great conversation today, guys. I really do think that we touched on, more than even just the title, a lot of things that I think are relevant to what's going on today. And I hope that we reached some people that needed to hear what we talked about. So thank you all for being here. And I guess we'll leave it at that. And as always, everybody out there, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.